Why don't you wait outside?
While The Boys is based on the comics and follows the basic subplots, it doesn't remain grounded to the source material, and surprisingly enough, that's a good thing. Garth Ennis expressed his frustration with the superhero genre in the comics and thrived on shock value, but the show goes a step further. It retains the basic elements of Mr. Ennis, but adds quite a few additional layers. You know, often doing some backhanded social commentary. Naturally, the show created several characters for cinematic and narrative purposes, 10 best of whom we would explore in this video. So without further ado, let's begin. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
She confessed, leak plugged.
You don't think the next word out of her mouth might have been you?
Sister Sage. Sister Sage, aka Jessica Bradley, is clearly one of the most crucial pieces of the puzzle that's The Boys. As a former Teenage Kicks member and a super genius, she's got the brains that make even the likes of A-Train tip his hat to her ego. Everyone thinks she's a bit too much with her smarts. I mean, sometimes it can be hard being around her, but then everyone at Vought has to put up with her because Homelander, the boss himself, sets his sights on her. Homelander's playing the long game. He's got plans for his son, Ryan, to be the next him. A sort of evil Superman, but with a dad's touch. Something he never got himself. He's also got his eyes on the political throne, hoping to get Victoria Newman in the presidential seat, but she's playing hard to get. With Stan Edgar no longer helping Homelander with his image, Homelander needs someone like Sage to keep the wheels turning at Vought. Furthermore, he needs someone who can handle and guide him, you know, more like a manager. Her being a black woman in the 7 works great as far as PR is connected. Plus, Homelander gets to show he's still the top dog, especially among those he views as beneath him. It seems like Stormfront did leave a little something behind. So, now, when Homelander brings Sage on board, he doesn't just get a new ally. He is one who can ignite a war, in whose fire all the bad guys can warm their hands. She steps into the chaos, cool as a cucumber, and her first order of business? This surely put the boys, including Billy Butcher and Huey, on their heels. Then there was the whole incident where she made Firecracker a punching bag for Starlight. They can't predict her. They can't counter her. She's always 10 steps ahead. Having said that, she may be pushing Homelander a bit too much. I mean, if played close to the chest, this card may just explode on her face, and she may find herself lasered. Not like she has any kind of protection against Homelander. Additionally, while Homelander wants to kinda use his son to get more fame and stuff, Sister Sage wants to protect Ryan as a hero in his own right, not as the son of Homelander. Kenji Miyashiro. As a kid, Kenji Miyashiro and his sister, Kimiko, were taken by the Shining Light Liberation Army after their parents were killed. Thrust into this new, harsh reality, Kimiko claimed up. She stopped speaking, and the siblings developed their own sign language to stay connected. They became each other's lifeline and always had each other's backs. However, Kimiko is whisked away to the US and turned into a Supe with the help of Compound V. Not wanting to miss out on this, the terrorists inject Kenji too, which gives him the power to move things with just a flick of his hands. Basically, telekinesis. But it's not all superpowers and glory. Kenji watches American superheroes commit heinous acts, and it steals his resolve to stick with the shining light. In fact, he even embraces their cause as his own. In Season 2, he flips a boat at the harbor and gets caught in video that Kimiko spots. She tracks him down, and their reunion is bittersweet. Despite their joy at finding each other safe, a rift forms when Kimiko realizes Kenji isn't ready to turn his back on his new ideals. Reluctantly, she helps the boys in capturing him. As they attempt to deliver him to the authorities, he uses an energy drink can to slip out of his cuffs. Chaos ensues when they're mistakenly pegged as both thieves, and a helicopter zeroes in on them. Amid the mayhem, Kenji tries to take down Butcher, but ends up crashing the helicopter into the water instead. As the Deep and the Seven close in, and Homelander corners Yui, Kenji doesn't think twice. He brings down the roof on Homelander to save Yui, but freedom is short-lived for Kenji. When Stormfront begins her chase, Kenji and Kimiko end up cornered on the rooftops. Stormfront captures Kimiko and Kenji dashes back to save her. Unfortunately though, Stormfront snaps his wrists, cutting off his powers, and then murders him.
My movie 3 weeks before release, and you can't walk down Fifth Avenue without bumping into a table.
Translucent. Translucent is your classic case of a superhero gone wrong. Instead of swooping in to save the day, he's more into boosting his bank account and spying on women while invisible, which, by the way, is his favorite state since he has to be naked for his power to work. Even when Queen Maeve catches him in the ladies' room, he jumps back to visibility and struts out without a snitch. But for all his power, Translucent doesn't really get the whole hero part of being a superhero. He's got a knack for reading people, probably owned him from all the eavesdropping he does, which makes him think he's smarter than he is. That smart doesn't save him though. He majorly misreads Yui, thinking he can sweet talk his way out of trouble, only to find out he's very, very wrong. Yui, alongside Billy Butcher, manages to capture Translucent and lock him up, but soon realizes that they've got a big problem. How do you kill someone you can't see who's also bulletproof? Yui ends up using a very, well, unique method, and they use a C4 to ensure Translucent won't be spying on anyone else. Translucent might have had a short run on screen, but his death started a scuffle between the boys and the Seven, which later spiraled into a full-blown war against Vought Industries. Ryan Butcher. Ryan is pretty much a mix of his parents, half Homelander and half Becca. He's got the sweet and gentle side from his mom, being the kind of kid who's polite to just about anyone he meets and loves nothing more than a good cookie. He's got a knack for picking up languages and he's quite the Lego animator. Ryan loves to learn and he's usually on point with his schoolwork, though he admits math isn't really his thing. The only time you'll see him lose his cool is when he's pushed too far. You know, like that time he blew up at Homelander, telling him to back off and leave him and his mom alone. Raised in isolation, Ryan used to be terrified of crowds, a fear he shook off in season 3 when he flew down to join a bunch of Homelander fans. But when he accidentally kills his mom with his heat vision, he is left reeling with guilt and fear, especially of his powers and, more intensely, of his blood-soaked dad. His nightmares are haunted by visions of Homelander wreaking havoc. However, when a Starlighter mistakenly attacks Ryan, Homelander kills the man, and it brings a smile on the little guy's face, which was a huge sign of how Homelander's influence might be taking root. While the show loves its dark twists, it usually reins in the chaos before total destruction comes around. Homelander and the other bad guys like Stormfront and Soldier Boy got their comeuppance by the season's end, and Ryan is still safe and sound, which could mean that Ryan's fate might swing toward the light, especially with Billy Butcher in his corner. Butcher, battling his own demons and dark deeds, might just be the key to steering Ryan away from a path like Homelander's. After all, Butcher promised Becca he'd looked out for the boy, and with his own clock ticking, it's a race against time to fulfill that promise. On the power front, Ryan isn't someone to underestimate. He shoved Homelander to the ground in a fit of rage. His heat vision is another level of intense, powerful enough to chop down Stormfront and even send Soldier Boy crashing into a wall. It's clear his abilities might even surpass Homelander's, especially when you consider the raw power he's shown at such a young age.
So you finally came to
Firecracker. Firecracker, one of the most latest members in the Seven, is a superhero, but she also hustles as a podcast host, public speaker, and all-around social media influencer. Needless to say, she's got a knack for stirring up the pot with her fiery podcast called The Truth Bomb with Firecracker, which is the shock jock radio of the boys' universe. Maybe she once had a lot of powers, but her superpower right now isn't the stuff of legends. She creates small explosive sparks by snapping her fingers, which can ramp up to larger blast if she really puts her mind to it. Aside from that, she's got the usual set of enhanced abilities thanks to a dose of Compound V, and carries around a Glock 17, which is more for show and to charm her base than, actual combat. When it comes to combat, she can hold her own against the likes of Kimiko, but she was knocked out cold when Butcher surprised her with a crowbar. Oh, and Starlight beat her to a pulp, so, she's not exactly the toughest out there. Firecracker was originally called Sparkler, and has some deep-seated issues from her pageant days, back when she and Annie January, aka Starlight, were just kids competing each other for trophies in the Little Miss Hero competitions. A bitter rivalry was born after Annie supposedly spread a rumor that knocked Firecracker out of the pageant circuit for good. Naturally, she's got a grudge that lasted years, and it fuels her vendetta against Annie. Behind her explosive facade and the rhetoric she spews on her show, there's a real question about whether Firecracker buys into the chaos she creates. She's most definitely in it for the paycheck and feeds her listeners' need for meaning into their turbulent lives with her unique brand of sensationalism. That's pretty much why Sister Sage sees her as a useful tool for the Seven. Firecracker mirrors Jubilee from the X-Men. Both can make things go boom with their hands, though Jubilee's got the potential to really blow things up at an atomic level. Personality-wise, Firecracker is a cocktail of the most controversial political figures and media personalities today, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene and Alex Jones. Ezekiel. Ezekiel is a high-profile Supes evangelist, but there's nothing godly about this terrible man. He was caught in the act during quite a wild night at a Supes-exclusive nightclub. When he's not doing sexually explicit stuff, he spends his time running an organization called Capes for Christ, where he charges big bucks for meet and greets and group baptisms. After one such baptism, Huey tries to blackmail him with some objectionable photos. The plan, though, meets a bump when Huey's phone gets fried by the water, which forces him to pivot and bluff about having a scandalous video. Pushed into a corner, Ezekiel tells Huey where to find the latest batch of Compound V. Later, during a 7-on-7 with Cameron Coleman segment, it's revealed that he was facing serious allegations of abuse and misconduct thrown his way by anonymous sources. By season 4, Ezekiel reappears at Firecracker's live show, where he was leading the crowd in prayer. However, he catches Frenchie snooping around Firecracker's trailer. The confrontation gets physical, and Ezekiel ends up in a fight with Butcher, who freezes one of Ezekiel's arms with a liquid nitrogen extinguisher. Despite losing an arm, Ezekiel tries to choke Butcher, but he's suddenly ripped apart by a mysterious force. Now, we have done another video on the subject where we explore how exactly Ezekiel died. You may want to check it out. Zoe Newman. In Glorious 5-Year Plan, Zoe's day starts like any other kid's might, zoning out in front of the TV with a bowl of cereal. But things take a serious turn at night. Zoe confides her fears about being injected with Compound V to her mom, Victoria. Reassured by her mother's comforting words, Zoe undergoes the procedure and goes through a truly painful transformation. By season 4, she becomes a full-blown Supe with some terrifying abilities. In the Department of Dirty Tricks episode, she's seen hanging out with Ryan. They grab some ice cream until Butcher arrives, following Ryan, and sends her on her way. Later, she stumbles upon Kimiko and Frenchie as they were in her mother's room. Surprisingly enough, she doesn't hesitate to jump into action. Zoe's abilities are nothing short of nightmarish. She can unleash 4 tentacle-like mouths with razor-sharp teeth from her own mouth, which can tear through flesh and bone with horrifying ease. She annihilates the CIA agents and even manages to rip off Kimiko's arm. On top of this horror show ability, Zoe has some serious physical strength because she was able to overpower skilled fighters like Kimiko with little to no effort. She's also got a healing factor that lets her bounce back from injuries like bullet wounds. It would be interesting to see where the kid's arc takes her. Now that Stan Edgar is back in business with Victoria, Zoe should be more protected than ever. You see, Homelander is not beneath using Zoe as bait to get what he wants from Newman, which pretty much puts Zoe in the line of Homelander's laser. Blue Hawk. Blue Hawk is more apt to be an example of a Supe who doesn't really live up to the hero part of superhero, compared to others like Ezekiel and Translucent. He's more focused on his own pleasure and carries a heavy patriotic streak, but his patriotism turns him into an evil mess. He's quick to anger and not shy about showing it. While he claims he's not racist and even shows a certain level of respect to fellow Supe A-Train, his actions tell a different story, especially towards black folks who don't express gratitude towards him. He seems to play cop during the day, but he doesn't really take it to heart. His lackadaisical attitude comes through loud and clear during the events of Herogasm. When Annie urges him to get everyone to safety because Soldier Boy is out for blood, Blue Hawk shrugs it off and dismisses the threat because he had Homelander's assurances. It's not until he witnesses Soldier Boy firsthand that he decides maybe it's time to spring into action. Blue Hawk's name seems like a snarky call to Blue Falcon, a military slang for someone who betrays their own. There are also hints of the classic DC Comics hero Black Hawk in Blue Hawk's persona. His entire demeanor and uniform, riot gear, a nightstick, and a traffic cop helmet resemble real-world law enforcement in riot situations. He often uses the excuse of self-defense to justify actions that are clearly driven by the racial bias. His actions, like the murder of a black man returning home from work, scream of tragic real-life events like the death of Trayvon Martin. Seth Reed. Seth's life became pretty disastrous after a fling with a Supe named Ice Princess. Things literally cooled off in the worst way when she accidentally froze his penis during a particularly hot moment of passion. Traumatized by the incident, Seth found himself in a support group for those who suffered at the hands of superheroes. In his professional life, Seth, along with his colleague Evan Lambert, worked in Vought's PR department. After Starlight heroically saved a woman from an assault, Seth and Evan jumped at the chance to revamp her image and pitched a sexier costume under the guise of empowering her femininity. They framed it as a feminist overhaul and totally ignored the obvious contradictions. The branding escapades didn't stop there. When Homelander outed Queen Maeve as a lesbian, Seth and Evan quickly rebranded her as Brave Maeve to celebrate her coming out and to celebrate traditional gender roles. By season 3, Seth was tasked with helping A-Train reconnect with his African American heritage. They planned a makeover to reflect this newfound embrace of his roots in his superhero suit and public persona. However, when they presented the idea to Ashley Barrett, she wasn't impressed, like at all. Yeah, I know Seth is not a Supe, but he's a new character nonetheless. Alistair Adonna. Alistair's grandfather founded the Fresca-loving Church of the Collective, and since then, his life has been stepped in it. As its leader, he became a master at networking and pulling influential figures from across the globe into his orbit. These connections spanned from national politics to the upper echelons of Vought International and the Supe community. He later maneuvered the Deep's comeback by feeding him intel on the whereabouts of a Supe terrorist. Alistair totally polished the Deep's tarnished image, but also leveraged it to boost the church clout. Once the Deep tied the knot with Cassandra, Alistair turned him into the church's poster boy. Alistair's demeanor was always one of benevolence, but you know, of course it's just a facade that masked his deeper, more manipulative schemes to control and blackmail when necessary. His overconfidence and deep-seated connections made him quite the player in the whole Supe business, but ultimately, his ambition led to his death. So yeah, these were the top 10 best fresh characters that the show created. If you like the show, I suggest you stick around because we have some more awesome stuff lined up. And if you like our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.
Don't do this.